And welcome back, folks, to another episode of Cafe Lily, starring Rosa and Kelsey. Kelsey and Rosa.
Hello, Rosa. Thank you. And it looks like we have a customer today. Hello.
Hello, I'm Cecil G. I'm your local Coyote Butch and Magical Girl Drag. I use he, they, or it. Feel free to mix it up. I'm a cartoonist for both business and pleasure, and I'm a board member and editor for the Cloudscape Comic Society. And I'm here to talk about magical girls.
Of course, we love magical girls here.
So, we also heard you made a webcomic.
I did. I made a webcomic called Carousel Waltz, which was briefly talked about on the show by my good friend and longtime reader, Nova. The version of Carousel Waltz that's up right now is available on Tapas. It's a little over 60 pages, and it's an outdated version of the story. I still really stand by the work, but it's not terrifically indicative of where the direction I want to take the comic or the workflow that I want to use going forward in order to realize this project and make it come to life and get it in the hands of excited readers. So I'll give a quick synopsis about what Carousel Waltz is and what it's going to be. So for those people who didn't catch or simply don't remember how Nova so kindly summarized it in the previous episode, Carousel Waltz is a young adult magical girl comic about these two teens. Their names are Cecily Tekwani and Anthea Patel, who become magical girls in the modern day Pacific Northwest to fight these like monsters based off of the different kingdoms of life. So like Animalia, Plancha, Fungi, and like eukaryotic animals like bacteria and archaea as well.
We heard that you were sort of reworking the comic, and that seems like a really interesting part of the process. Would you like to go into a little bit more detail about that?
Sure. So when I was first creating Carousel Waltz, I was doing it in the typical 1 page a week update schedule that many webcomics follow. And I was also trying to do it in full color with rendering because this project is my baby and I wanted it to visually look how I personally want my art style to be remembered. But even with a buffer, trying to keep that in mind is a really difficult thing to do, and it's a lot of art to adhere to myself on a weekly basis, even not accounting for other life circumstances or responsibilities. But if I plan to do a webcomic and understanding that it's a 5 to 10 year long commitment, I need to build that time spent not doing comics into my schedule, as well being able to put the comic hiatus, fall back, regroup, made me able to really think of like, okay, part of doing a webcomic is being able to like be flexible. You know that your comic is going to change in the several years you're going to be doing it. And so there's actually a little bit of encouragement I try to give towards people, like, don't put it all down in paper. Like, don't try to set your story in stone. Give yourself room to experiment and be flexible. So when you do need to make changes down the line, you're not completely overhauling established things in your story. So I tried to keep that in mind with my own work with Carousel Waltz, but what happened was it was a little bit too much by the seat of my pants, I think. And a lot of the things I wanted to say with it, I realized I could be using characters and plot points in more efficient and more evocative ways, more resonant capabilities that would make it a stronger story to tell and more appreciated by people who would hopefully find it and connect to my work. I could give a synopsis of what the current new plot is.
Yeah, sure, you can do that.
So, in the newest version of the story, Cecily Tekwani and Anthea Patel are accompanied by their friends who become magical girls in order to fight against a mysterious magical entity that is slowly engulfing their sleepy small town of Potter's Fields, called the Garden of Sorrow. It stretches on for miles in every direction. Their magical power draws from the Schiller Heritage Carousel, a 100-plus-year-old merry-go-round that's the pride and joy of the town. It's in the town square in a pavilion in a park. And each of the teens, the main cast, are chosen to wield magic. They're called a dancer, and each of them embodies one of the many hand-carved animals on the carousel, granting them weapons and conditional immortality so long as they're transformed. While trying to protect their town, the kids have to deal with like parental expectations, interpersonal conflict, friendship, love, transing their gender, and considering what's living and what's dying for, and what's worth protecting.
Very nice. It sounds very dramatic.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's something that's really important when there's a project that, as you said, is your baby. It's definitely going to change as you grow and your tastes change and your style of writing or drawing changes. So that's something really interesting to consider in making webcomics.
Mm-hmm. For Carousel Waltz, I also am going to probably publish it as a series of graphic novels or issues, full chapters at a time, rather than a page-a-day update or page-a-week update, so that people have a full coherent story to read all at once rather than having to be drip-fed the excruciatingly slow pace of webcomics, as well as like me being able to pace my work better. I think on both ends it'll be a longer wait, but it's a more fulfilling experience as both a creator and hopefully for my readers also.
It seems like more webcomics are going that way now.
I think there's a big push to trying to make the work more sustainable, and especially since it's, again, such a long-term commitment.
Yeah, I'll be looking forward to seeing the revised version because I read the current version and loved it.
Thank you so much.
I love the visual of Anthea, like, pulling out her pistol and then just taking the shot.
That was one of my favorite pages to draw, absolutely. I was so excited to get to that page.
So, I want to ask, what are your inspirations for Carousel Waltz? Aside from the most obvious.
So Carousel Waltz is as much inspired by Utena as it is the works of David Lynch, particularly Twin Peaks. It's also inspired a good deal by Over the Garden Wall, Suspiria, and his Dark Material series. And I really can't say my inspirations for the series without mentioning how influential Homestuck was for me as a creator and as a cartoonist and as a person making original characters. I really love magical realism, surreality, and unreality. Anything that feels like the world operates on rules slightly different than our own. And most, if not all, of the works that I talked about, like they touch on themes of adolescence and a deep look into psychology and the subconscious, and expressing emotions that are difficult to communicate.
Any visuals from Twin Peaks that influence you, like such as the Red Rooms?
Yeah, the setting itself being a small Washington town is drawn directly from Twin Peaks. I also live in a small Washington town, so it's like, wow, it's like I'm really there. The name Potter's Fields is supposed to invoke the sort of naming convention of Twin Peaks and the other things inspired by it, like Silent Hill or Greenvale. I really do want to invoke some of the icons from Twin Peaks, like the red rooms. Yeah, those velvet curtains and the zigzag floor are so iconic that if I can find a way to sneak them in there, I'm going to.
Now, is Twin Peaks the only thing you take influence from the body of work of David Lynch?
So I've watched his other movies like Blue Velvet and Eraserhead, and I think that they're a huge inspiration in like my tone and art, like my art style, but I don't know if they're a conscious influence upon Carousel Waltz so much as it is something that's like within my portfolio of understanding and storytelling.
So you won't see something such as the Eraserhead baby.
Probably not. Yeah. Although it would be very funny to slip him in somewhere.
Well, we'll have to keep an eye out.
I love that thing.
Maybe one of the characters will have the Eraserhead poster on their bedroom wall or something.
Why did you decide that this story would be best told as a magical girl story. Do you have a long history with the magical girl genre?
I do. When I was a kid, I watched like Pokemon and on Cartoon Network, and we had a collection of Ghibli DVDs. But it wasn't until I was in like second or third grade that I realized manga and anime were culturally different from Western cartoons with its own genre conventions and rules and tropes. And it was also around this time I coincidentally found Tokyo Mew Mew and Sailor Moon at my local library, which were immediately devoured by me. And I watched a lot of cartoons heavily inspired by magical girls going into like latency and adolescence. My Little Pony, Friendship is Magic, and Steven Universe were big ones when I turned 11, 12, 13. And by that point, I was starting to realize that these things were referencing Sailor Moon and Tokyo Mew Mew and magical girls deliberately, and that they were drawing from influences, and maybe it would be worthwhile to seek out those influences. So in my teens, I dove into the catalog of magical girl anime. I watched Princess Tutu, Cardcaptor Sakura. I watched Pretty Cure, Revolutionary Utena, all sorts of things. I wanted to tell Carousel Waltz as a magical girl story because I think magical girls really speak to, I think they're probably the best way to show what it's like to be an adolescent and to try to grow up while navigating gender in a way that I don't think boys coming of ages necessarily do. Not to say that coming of age stories for boys don't navigate gender, but they do it in a fundamentally different way than stories for girls or for people who are non-binary or trans. Magical girls, to me, and you can see this especially in like the very first magical girl series where it was like little witches and stuff like that. Their powers involve turning into an adult for a brief point of time to experience a career. Like, and you can even see that in Sailor Moon as well. Like, Moon Prism makeup turned me into a waitress or a bus station attendant, turned me into a veterinarian. And it's a way for girls to basically play dress up as having the responsibility and power of an adult with the safety of being able to take off the costume afterwards. That's microdosing on adulthood in a period of tumultuous change. You can see that in like Pretty Cure too. A lot of the Pretty Cure characters become like look a little bit visually older or take on aspects of careers within their costumes. There's an entire season around careers in the future even. And so what I love about Magical Girls is being able to explore that and explore what does it mean to be a girl and grow up? What does it mean if you're part of girlhood but you're not a girl? Or what if you want to experience girlhood but you've been told you can't? How do we make this empowering for children who are going through a catastrophic period of their life where they're not entirely sure that they're going to emerge to the other side, let alone unscathed? I think Magical Girls at its strongest are an empowering and honest look at a developmental period in our lives that can help encourage and comfort a vulnerable child. These stories really helped me when I was a kid. It was my first experience seeing like girl superheroes in a way that I personally like could identify with. It was my first experience seeing characters who were trans or gender nonconforming or lesbian or bisexual, and it was my first time experiencing stories in which they saved the day and didn't necessarily have to rely on somebody else. Like they already had the capability to not just survive but to thrive. And when you're a kid and you're scared and you're not sure who you are or where you want to go, that's a really heartening message to hear. It's You're gonna be okay, you know? So I really want to capture, above all else, that feeling, and that's why Carousel Waltz has to be a magical girl series. It can't just be superheroes. It has to be at that nexus of gender and adolescence and autonomy and empowerment and a look towards the future in ways that, while other genres can, of course, tell stories about, I think none are so inherently tied to it as magical girls are. I don't think you could tell a magical girls show without consciously or unconsciously addressing the theses of the genre.
That's a really beautiful way of looking at it. And we're looking forward to seeing how these themes come into play in the revised Carousel Waltz.
Me too. I'm excited to get my story out there.
I'm glad to hear your perspective, because then now that will like open up the way I take in the genre now in a way that I didn't think about.
By the way, this is a question, like, nothing to do with anything, just for me.
Hmm.
Are you a tokusatsu fan?
I am.
I knew it!
Yeah!
I was telling Rosa, I was like, I think this author's a tokusatsu fan. I don't have any proof, I just have the vibe.
I feel like if I'm talking about like the transformative aspect of magical girls is almost directly tied to the tokusatsu phenomenon anyways. So if you're a fan of one, you're a fan of the other, and especially it's like tokusatsu is very much the sort of boys' adolescence I mentioned.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad.
Absolutely red for filth there.
I wanted to ask about the character designs in your comic, because I think that's a real highlight. Could you explain some of the thought behind the designs?
Oh, sure. So in my setting, I mentioned the magical girl, a term which I use conjecturally. The cast is several non-binary and boy characters are part of this. All of them come in pairs. They're called dancers because you require a dance partner in order to transform. You can't go this alone, essentially. So their costumes, I felt, not only had to be representative of the character, but also the pair that they make with their dance partner, which actually it was something I didn't actually account for that much in the original version of Carousel Waltz you can see online. The two characters, Opal and Ari, who are briefly seen, were originally going to be dance partners for each other, but their costumes don't really sync up. So in this new version, they have different dance partners, completely new characters not present in the original, whose magical girl outfits more complement each other. Following in the tradition of Revolutionary Girl Utena, the designs draw a lot from military regalia. There are a lot of like epaulettes, aiguillettes, double-breasted jackets, lots of gloves and trim. I wanted the groups to have like this knightly vibe, like that while there is no true uniform, this is still part of an order, they're still a collective. They're fantastic and fancy, and they're also indications of being in a military. This is a regiment, you're a set, you're ultimately soldiers. They're also easier to draw than frills, and it's easier to standardize. Well, every character gets epaulettes and an aiguillette, rather than saying, okay, well, this character has like a bodice and then this skirt style and then like this kind of button and an individual pattern on the bodice and the skirt and this sleeve design and these hair ornaments.
Uh-huh.
I try to remind myself, that design is very nice for a character ref. Can I stand to draw it 10,000 times? And if the answer's no, I gotta go back. One thing I really wanted to get across with their magical girl outfits is like that what I talked about, the empowerment before. Like these are empowering clothes that the characters enjoy wearing. I've seen like a few like magical girl shows or parodies make a joke about the girl being embarrassed by her costume. Sometimes like even being embarrassed by like it being skimpy or whatever, which is like especially weird if the character's 14. And I just don't think that's a good message to tell, and it's a mean-spirited joke. Like, ultimately, the joke there isn't about a silly costume. The joke is about the girl's embarrassment and the humiliation she feels. And girls being made to wear outfits against their will that they feel humiliated in is just like the reality for a lot of kids. The idea of a magical trinket or a fairy companion implicitly enforcing gender roles through clothing is actually really depressing to me. Yeah, I can grant like wishes and give you superpowers, but you have to wear a skirt you hate the whole time. Like to me, a girl's outfit should be their ideal self, their choice, even if it's like a subconscious one. Like you don't need to depict the magical girl in question drawing her outfit. I think Madoka does that. But if being a magical girl means embodying responsibility and autonomy, the clothes should reflect that. Like Cicely's magical girl costume is based off of rhinestone cowboys. They wear a tasseled, bedazzled cowboy shirt with a western cut and embroidered chaps and fancy cowboy boots. It's like the logical conclusion of what they would wear if they wanted to feel fancy and uplifted. It's still butch, it's still cowboy, but it's unequivocally magical.
Yeah, love that design.
As for like the characters themselves in their civilian clothes are an excellent shorthand for imparting information onto a reader. That's basic character design. But it is still something that like, oh yeah, you forget that this is a deliberate choice somebody has to make along the lines to describe something about the character. Like Cicely wears this like sort of the grunge fashion of the time of the 90s with thrift store flannels and jeans with rips in the knees and an indestructible leather cowboy boots. Like, so they wear clothes to last because they're not going to get any new ones. And this tells something about Cicely. They're practical, money conscious, and probably frequently doing something that requires durability in their clothing. And they're also clothes that help masculinize. Layered flannels broaden shoulders and flatten chests and hide curves, and cowboy boots give a subtle lift and adjust the way you walk. Cicely is agender and a butch lesbian, so that's something that they would keep in mind as somebody who can't go on any sort of medical transition, especially not in 1993. In a potentially post-apocalyptic world, they only have their clothes to use. And the other protagonist, Anthea, on the other hand, dresses a lot more fancifully, both in terms of her own personal taste being less practical than Cicely's, and also a little less like something you're going to see someone wearing when you go to like the grocery store. She wears A-line skirts and petticoats and sashes with giant bows on the back and frilly blouses and dangly earrings. She dresses very intentionally and has the money to afford new clothes and to wear new clothes without there being like a special occasion. Her economic bracket is a little higher than Cicely's, and she prioritizes her self-expression even when it's not practical. Things like high-waisted skirts and sashes and fluffy blouses can also help feminize the silhouette because Anthea is a trans girl. It can accentuate a waist and hide a flat chest, so even consciously or subconsciously, they're picking clothes, Anthea and Cicely, to alleviate dysphoria, and that can be picked up on by a perceptive audience who might relate to those feelings and those decisions. I also put a lot of thought into like the character weapons. The way somebody chooses to fight says something about how they broach conflict. Cicely's weapons are their fists. When they turn into their dancer form, they have grizzly bear paws, ears, and a needle bear tail. And they strike out with these like horrifyingly huge claws with a newfound force behind their blow. So it's pragmatic, it's unrefined. They don't care about using tools. They're here to survive and defend their territory. And it was mentioned earlier that Anthea's weapon is a pistol. Her weapons are a pair of flintlock dueling pistols specifically, and it being a dueling weapon is an homage to Utena, of course, but it also shows how Anthea is completely different in fighting style than Cicely. Each gun is a single shot, so she effectively gets 2 shots before she has to reload. And guns can keep you away from your adversary, and they do a lot of damage if you do manage to hit your target. So Anthea knows that she has limited opportunities to retaliate against a foe, and she can't afford to get her hands dirty, so she fights from afar, and when her volley hits its mark, it's devastating.
Rosa and I were both talking about how we love the design of Anthea's pistol.
I noticed that in Cecilia's design, they have a flower covering one of their eyes.
Oh yeah. So that hopefully is going to be a design choice that I keep forward. Although the flower might not be an ordinary lily anymore. In the original version of Carousel Waltz, they die, and Anthea agrees to become a magical girl if it means bringing Cecily back to life. And they're being kept alive by magic, and so the flower is sort of a representation of the fact that the powers that be, the magical force, the Garden of Sorrow, is the one preserving Cecily's life, and that it might not be something forever. The original plan was like in the new version of the story, and I don't mind spoiling because all this stuff is like 5 years minimum in the future at this point. Cicely dies under different circumstances, and the Garden of Sorrow is no longer the active like wish granter of the dancers. So there's no need for the flower to keep that clock ticking. So if I keep it in the design, it's going to have to represent something else, and that'll be a storytelling problem for future me. I would like to keep it though, and if I all the characters have a theme flower to them, which means something in flower language, and Cicely's is the red spider lily. So if I do keep it in, I might change it to a red spider lily.
We love that. We love characters with themed flowers.
Yeah. Look at this cafe.
Yes. Anthea's is a calla lily. Neither calla lilies or red spider lilies are actually technically lilies in the, like, they're not in the same family. But I thought like they're both so striking and so unique that, and they represent the character better, that even though they're not technically taxonomically lilies, they still functionally would probably fit the representation of, Yuri.
Yeah, of course.
You gotta get the Yuri in there somewhere. Alright, Rosa, did you have any more questions you wanted to ask?
No. But I did enjoy the answers. What I heard, it was very insightful, and you really thought out everything, and it is wonderful. It's like hearing a person's thought process and just the development. It's just like fascinating.
Thank you. It's really an honor that you both of you took such an interest and kindness in wanting to hear my thoughts and to explore my work with me. It's really just extraordinarily flattering.
Of course, we love your work, and I guess we have to thank Nova for recommending your work.
Mm-hmm. Shoutouts to Nova.
Thank you, Nova.
Yeah, absolutely love meeting other Yuri creators. It's very fascinating to me that 9 out of 10 all been butch. I'm like the only femme in the group of butches. So, I feel now is a good time to talk about our top 3 favorite Yuris.
Woohoo!
Yes, it's a new year, and we need to reflect on the Yuri that we read in the previous year.
So, who's ready to go?
I can, since I have my answers here.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
So my top 3, these aren't in any particular order, but one of the most notable and most interestingly, like, I love the art style, and it was I Love Amy by Unun.
I Love Amy?
Yeah!
Blonde girl.
In that very cutesy, almost Sanrio-y art, like
Yes!
much more thick line art style. I really love that. I'm glad you two know about it already then, because I was like, you gotta read this. So, I Love Amy is like this psychological thriller rom-com manhwa about a yandere girl named Bibi who tries to murder the girl she thinks is getting in the way of her like crush on the most popular boy in school, and accidentally, in her murder attempt, befriends her instead, taking pity on this poor girl's like crushing loneliness. I really liked it because despite my reservations about the yandere trope, it was actually a very grounded look into it, and what little violence actually occurs doesn't feel egregious or out of the realm of plausible for a teen. You're not gonna see like brutal graphic murder or torture scenes or anything like that. Like BB and the titular Amy both have mental illnesses and complexes that feed into each other, and the plot revolves around their struggles to be understood and to heal and to be loved. So it's a very optimistic look at the trope. Like, quote unquote, broken girls aren't hopeless, and they're not the way they are for no reason. So, like, somebody else made them this way. And if you like earnest, humanizing depictions of mental illness and dark comedies with a happy ending, this is the choice for you. My other Yuri was Her Tale of Shimchong, which is a Korean manhwa by Seri and illustrated by Biwon. This is a historical fiction political drama that takes place in Korea. So a beggar girl named Shimchong, through a twist of fate, finds her in the service of the local chancellor's bride-to-be. So in becoming her handmaid, Chong is thrust into the class and gender divide of aristocratic society, having to navigate like deadly political spheres she finds herself entangled in. All the while, love blooms between the lady and handmaid. If the part of the draw for Reverend Lieutenant for you was that push and pull within an oppressive system and the tentative trust between a pair of girls trying to navigate a power imbalance in a society that would actively reward them for betraying each other, then absolutely check out Her Tale of Shimchong. My last one. Hear me out.
Right.
I read The Last Unicorn by Peter Beagle. And this is not technically girls' love, but it is the most lesbian book I've read in a while. So I think it might count. The story of the unicorn is metaphorical for adolescence and growing up and feeling new feelings because of it, like wisdom and regret. And her body in the book is transformed through magic into that of a human woman's. And although all through that sequence, the third of the book where she's a human, several characters remark that she doesn't seem to count as a woman, that there's something deeply other about her, that she seems to be part of like this third gender, or doesn't seem to even like take into account gender at all, or doesn't fit the criteria for what it means to be a woman, which as a non-binary lesbian really, really spoke to me. I was like, oh my god, I also don't count as a girl. Something about me definitely pings with that. And a kindly man shows affection to her and begins to court her simply because he's a prince and she is a lady. And the characters sort of know that they are in a fairy tale, so this is what they ought to be doing. And his arbitrary masculine deeds fail to please her. His well-meaning poems go unappreciated. Eventually they grow close because she knows no other. But the whole while the unicorn keeps feeling like there's something missing, that this isn't really her life, that this isn't who she wants to be. Her feelings for the prince are real, but they're not the full picture. Fondness and longing and loneliness are mistaken for romance because the world they live in say it's so. Eventually, the unicorn triumphs in her quest, and she turns back into a unicorn, but she grows up, she's changed, she's questioned herself and regretted and grown wise. And she's become the version of herself that's the best version of herself within a body that she wants. And so it's not girls' love in the sense that it's not a romance of a Yuri, but I thought there was something so inextricably lesbian about this narrative that I felt was at least partially intentional on Mr. Beagle's part. That was probably the most evoking text to me as a lesbian that I read in 2023.
No, that nothing but respect. We are very flexible with our definitions of Yuri here.
Yeah.
What about you two?
Rosa, do you want to go through your list?
I went to go speed round for ones I didn't finish. Ones that are like the runner-ups. Speed running. Donuts Under a Crescent Moon. The guy shows it's just in what's in the guy, and she cooks, she eats. Those are my runner-ups. Oh, and another runner-up is it's a movie called Bottoms.
Oh, I haven't seen that yet. I've been wanting to so bad.
It's very funny. My girlfriend described it as if they turn Clone High into a live-action movie about lesbians.
Oh, well, I'm sold.
Ryan thinks that everything has something to do with Clone High.
He's not wrong. It's the thing because the comedy is exactly like Clone High, and there is a few slurs in there, so watch out for the viewers.
Isn't it Coen Brothers? Yeah.
So yeah, that's why it's like out of the top 3. Because oh, not for everyone. All right, here are my top 3 Yuris of the 2023. Third place, Ayako is in love with Hiriko. Now that one was a pretty fun one. I just remember have such a fun time reading it, just seeing her trying to get her attention and everything, and then just wants her to be respected. It's such a fun time. This femme is trying to go for this woman, supposedly womanizing lesbian, and it's go for it, girl. Do your best. Number 2, Young and JN.
Okay.
I love it. I love everything about it. The drama, the insanity, But yeah, I was grasping in my seat every page, reading every moment, seeing her mess up so much. It's such a fun time. Warning, it's 18 plus. Now, there's a reason why this made it to number 2 inside of the amount of love and respect I had for it. Number 1 for Russ's Yuri of the Year 2023. It's a donut precure.
No.
Okay, it's Run Away With Me, Girl. That was very beautiful. Just seeing these two struggle and then just trying to understand what they wanted and that they wanted to be taken seriously too by the end of it. It's just wonderful, and it's just also came to me at a time when I wish this was the plot of Otona Precure. So it was filling in the gap for me.
I'm really glad that you liked that one so much.
Oh, I love it a lot. I love the extra chapters afterwards too, and just got so much respect for this. The tension, the drama, wondering will they make it true? Will they achieve their happiness? Can they do it? And just happily seeing them together. It was just beautiful. It was something something I wanted. It was really something I was looking for at that time.
We're trying to here. Be serious. I mean, Otona Precure, in a way, is probably one of the most influential Yuri of the year to us, because it got us to actually start making Yuri comics.
Anything that makes people make comics is good.
Yeah, Otona Precure made me so upset. We end up starting a Yuri group. But that's an episode for another time. Now, Kelsey.
Okay, I guess I'll go through my list, which it turns out is very similar to yours. So my number 3 is Patience and Esther by S.W. Searle. I only talked about this briefly on the show, but it's one of the comics that I picked up at Paper Cuts last year. It's an Edwardian romance between two servants who work on the same estate. I do occasionally enjoy a period romance, and I thought this was a very enjoyable one. It uses the time period very well within the story, and there's sort of themes of the politics of the time. And also the romance is very sweet. My number 2 is Run Away With Me Girl by Batan. Rosa and I both read this. It's the story of a woman in her 20s who helps the woman who she has a crush on flee her abusive fiancé.
That sounds super poignant.
Yeah, it definitely is. It had my favorite art of anything that I've read this year. The story is very concerned with what it means to live your best life as a woman who loves women. And I thought that all the characters were very interesting, and I thought that it was just gorgeous overall. And my number 1 is Young and Jae-in by Jack Bull. This is a comic that we didn't even talk about on the show.
No, we did, just but in the secret menu because of the contents inside.
Yeah, we talked about it on the Patreon exclusive episode, but Ryan shut down the Patreon, so you can't even watch that anymore. There's no evidence that we talked about this. But I think this comic rightfully earns my #1 spot because no other media this year changed the way that I think about myself. Ayoung and Jae-in is about this couple who are always fighting. They can't stand each other, but they're also the only ones who understand each other, so they keep being drawn back together. But then they fight again, and it's this cycle that goes on and on. And after we first read this, Rosa and I were talking about our thoughts just in private.
Yeah.
And I said that when they were fighting, I found myself seeing Jae-in's point of view more often than I saw Ayoung's. And Rosa said to me, "Yeah, that makes sense. You and Jae-in are pretty alike. Neither of you could handle a femme."
And I was right! And I was right on more than one occasion.
Yeah, that's an assessment which I would describe as harsh but fair. And since then, there have been multiple times where I've just been going about my life, and I'm in a situation, and I stop and I think, you know, maybe I am like Jae-in. Maybe I can't handle a femme. So basically, this comic haunts me, and I think it gets my #1 spot for that. It's a really good one. I would recommend any of the comics that we talked about. And I'm definitely going to have to check some of the ones that you recommended.
Yeah, definitely. I've already written them all down, and I'm gonna go binge read them.
Like to say, I look forward to reading more Yuris and creating more Yuris. I hope to make a Yuri about a messy main character that smells kind of like dirt, pull a femme in the funniest way possible.
Yeah, you keep threatening to make that one.
What about you, Kelsey? What do you look forward to this year?
I guess I'm looking forward to going back to paper cuts again this year and hopefully finding some more Yuri by local artists.
And what about you, Cecil? What's your goal for this year?
This year, I want to wrap up the current Doodle webcomic I've got going. Just have it finished, have that accomplishment under my belt, and really start working on the scripts and thumbnails for the first volume of Carousel Waltz. I'm really excited. I'm really looking forward to it.
Good luck with it. We'll be keeping an eye out.
Absolutely.
Before we go, Cecil, where can people find you on the internet?
Oh, yes. You can find my Ko-fi store at Ko-fi/CecilG. All of my comics are there, and you can also contact me. My Instagram is Doloregion, which is DOLOREREIGON. I post art there.
Very nice. Everyone, go check it out.
Yeah, check it out. Look forward to it. And I guess with that, we're closing out the shop. Thank you all for joining another installment of Café Lily.
See you next year.
Good night.